if you don't have a relationship with them.
It says the man should love his wife the way Christ loved the church.
As we nourish our spirit, we also need to nourish our body and look after the body itself.
Whose responsibility is it to teach our children? Hi, today with me I've got Mr. Clubb, and we're going to be talking about bowel cancer. So, over to you.
Hello. Talking about bowel cancer, not because I'm a medical expert, but because I was diagnosed with bowel cancer just over 5 years ago, and I feel quite privileged to, at least so far, to have beaten bowel cancer. A couple of weeks ago I got officially the all clear on my 5-year checkup, which is a big milestone for any cancer patient. So I feel that I want to avoid people suffering a fate worse than mine. I feel that I was lucky, and I want to share that luck with other people.
Well, do you want to just run us through your experience, how it started, and obviously you're in remission, like you said?
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about some telltale signs later on, but in my particular case, I didn't spot a telltale sign. I was on holiday, a beginning of a holiday, and we all had a long flight, and we wanted to go to the toilet, and somebody followed me into the toilet and noticed what I hadn't, was that there was blood in the pan after it had been flushed and whatever. And we weren't sure, because we were tired, the order of which we'd gone to the toilet, so we all kept a lookout to see whose it was, and it transpired that it was mine. And for 2 weeks whilst on holiday, regularly there was a show of blood. I promised the person who spotted the blood that I would go to the GP immediately on my return, and we returned on the Sunday, and I was with the GP on the Wednesday. I don't think that I would have gone to the GP if it hadn't have been for the promise that I made to that person. Because from returning from holiday until today, only one show of blood, and so I would have put it down to just something that had happened. Yeah. My GP, who I've got nothing but praise for, did an examination, couldn't see or feel anything, but the best thing that she did was to say, we won't leave it at that, we will actually get a second opinion. And so I went to see an expert in that field, and he did a more thorough, shall we say, in-depth examination, and identified that there was a tumour. His professional view was that it was malignant. He had to have a biopsy done, and sadly, when I went back, it confirmed his suspicion that it was a malignant tumour. The problem was, although he assured me at that point that it was operable and everything should work out well, the issue was whether or not he had to effectively take away so much bowel that I would have a permanent colostomy bag, because the tumour was very, very low down. Probably a little bit of a joke, but my GP, a lady, I think probably had short fingers, because all of the men that examined me could actually feel the tumour. So yes, we have had a little bit of a joke with Dr. Lisa Gladwin, that she ought to have longer fingers, but there we go. So I was then put in contact with an oncologist who's now a professor, Bruce Sizer, and an Australian, a good-humoured Australian, and he said that if they operated, it was almost certain that I would lose my bowel at that, or a natural bowel at that stage, and he was therefore charged with doing something that would reduce that possibility. But he warned me that as far as any papers were concerned, that had never been achieved. And more importantly, all the American research on the possibility of him achieving it said it couldn't be done.
Okay.
And what he had to do was simultaneously reduce the size of the tumour, but increase the size or the distance between my sphincter, my bumhole, to the tumour, because there had to be a large enough area for them to remove the affected area and reconnect me together. So he said the odds of achieving that objective were slim, and he warned me that that was the case. But I had several weeks of radiotherapy. I had that was once a day. I had to attend 5 days a week. I had to attend the hospital, and the actual setting up of the radiotherapy took longer than the zapping per day, because I had tattoos that were not visible to the naked eye around my body, so that each time I laid there for the radiotherapy, they got me in exactly the same position.
Yeah, okay.
So there was laser beams on me. But the actual radiotherapy treatment took less than 2 minutes.
Okay.
And then I'd go away. There could have been symptoms associated with the treatment. I also had chemo by tablet, not intravenously,
Okay.
but I didn't suffer from any of the problems that I could have done. So I got through that, and then they have a period between the treatment and a further examination, what they call the cooking time.
Okay.
I went back to see a surgeon, and he did an internal examination, and he was absolutely ecstatic about the fact that Bruce had done the business.
Wow.
So he had not only reduced the size of the tumour, it actually had gone. They could see where it had been, because there was a little ulcer on the inside of my bowel wall, but it had gone, otherwise gone. And he had created that space.
Wow.
So Bruce has been writing papers for medical journals and things like that.
So he's guinea pig. So
and most people think that when you have the sort of thing that I've had and whatever, that they go up your back passage for the treatment, for the surgery and whatever. But that wasn't the case. They're experimenting much more now, but they're not yet at the point, I think, where that's the normal method.
Okay.
So I went back for my for a chat with my surgeon and with Bruce Sizer, and I said, "It's fantastic news, isn't it? Because the tumour's gone." You know. And they said, not necessarily so, because it's gone to the naked eye, and most of the tests that you've had, CT scans and things like that, MRI scans, suggest that it's gone, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has. So I said, well, you must make the call as to whether you're going to operate or not. And they said, yeah, the trouble is, if we do operate and it really has gone, you're going to go through a major operation for nothing. But if we don't operate and it comes back, we've missed that golden opportunity.
Yes.
So I saw them on a Wednesday evening. My surgeon rang me on the Thursday lunchtime, and he said, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. But we've decided that we will operate because that's the best option.
Sure. Yeah.
And that was the Thursday. I had the operation on the Monday, which was about 4.5 hour operation.
Wow.
And they cut you from down there up to your navel, and they bring everything out and work on it and then put everything back. So it is a major operation.
You make it sound really nice.
Well, yeah, but it saved my life.
It did.
So you go through most things willingly in those circumstances. I had a temporary colostomy bag for about 3 months. My recovery from the main operation was about 6 weeks.
Okay.
But I then, after 3 months, went and had my colostomy bag removed. The official name for where they connect it to is a stoma.
Okay.
So they create a little sort of nipple type thing and to connect the bag up to. I can't say that was necessarily a joyful period, but if it had have meant that I'd got it for the rest of my life, but I lived, then there's lots of people out there who have stomas who are quite happy, in some cases much happier than they were before. People with Crohn's disease and things like that, colitis, go through a hell with their bowels, and so sometimes a colostomy or ileostomy bag is
the least of your problem.
That's right, yes. Yeah. I used to employ somebody who said that had given him peace of mind.
Wow, wow. I mean, obviously hearing the experience that you go through and the possibility, should we operate, should we not, and all that. I mean, there's an element of your family involved in all this.
Yes, there is. The trouble is that I just got my head down. I did the radiotherapy, I did the chemo, I did this, the operation or whatever. And I felt, with hindsight, I didn't at the time, with hindsight I now feel quite selfish about it, because my family were going through trauma and I just got on with it. And so looking back, I think that it would have been useful for my family to have been aware of the charity that I now support called Beating Bowel Cancer. In fact, I'm a presenter for Beating Bowel Cancer. But the unique part about that charity is not that it helps cancer patients, people with bowel cancer, it helps the families as well. So the families can ring up and say, I don't understand this, and what does that mean, and so on and so forth. So it's not just for the individual. But there are big problems with beating bowel cancer, mainly because people don't recognise the symptoms. The symptoms can be varied, as in my case, I perhaps had a symptom but didn't recognise it. But the main symptoms are a change in bowel habit. So I have a chum who I used to go to school with and still keep in touch with. He goes to the toilet about 6 times a day. So that's his norm and has done since he was a young person. I also have another friend who, particularly when we're on holiday, probably doesn't go for 3, 4, 5 or 6 days.
Whoa.
That's norm for her.
Okay.
So you need to be aware of what your bowel habit is. And if there's a change in that bowel habit, not just because you'd been out and had a really hot curry the night before or whatever, but a persistent change in bowel habit for 3 weeks, you need to get to your GP, because it could be something that needs attention. Doesn't mean to say it's cancer,
yeah.
but it could be something that needs attention. The bloating, pains in the stomach can be another sign. A big loss of weight equally, as well as putting on weight and feeling bloated. Loss of weight for no apparent reason. But as in my case, blood with your stools, which is what happened to me, or blood in the stools, could be a telltale sign. Having said that, a lot of people that I have spoken to in the presentations that I do, or with personal friends, who have had symptoms that I've just described, have been to their GP, have then been referred, and it has been something else. Totally. It's been a hemorrhoid, it's been something of that ilk. But they needed treatment.
Yeah.
One friend that I've just been away for a few days with, he had all of the symptoms, but it was a high-up hemorrhoid. And whilst they were examining him, they banded it, put an elastic band around it to actually, in time, remove it. He's now as fit as a fiddle. A lady friend of mine was suffering for a long, long time because she didn't want to go to her GP, didn't want to have anything done. Polyps. straightforward as that, and so they removed them under, in her case, local, because she liked watching it on the TV,
Wow.
which is not something that I've enjoyed. But you have to be aware of a potential. You have to, the word I like using all of the time is early. Because whatever it is, whether it be a hemorrhoid, whether it be a polyp, whether it be something else, after 3 weeks that needs investigation, if only to say nothing to worry about. But if it was something to worry about, which would happen in the minority of instances, it gives you the best possible chance of surviving it. And I believe that the chances that I got through my friend spotting the blood in the pan, through my GP being proactive, not a lot of GPs are, in my experience. There's a big drive to get GPs to recognise the symptoms sooner. And the miracle that Bruce Sizer worked with the radiotherapy and chemo, those 3 things needed to happen to be where I am today.
So, quick recap. Obviously, you've commended your GP, and obviously the surgeon or your consultant that saw you through. I think there's also that key aspect, because I know you and I have talked about this before, that you just said, okay, this is my situation, it needs solving.
Yes.
I think sometimes we bury our head and we say, we think it's going to go away, or maybe in my case or my kind of society, we say we're going to pray it away, you know, and whereas all we need really is just to seek medical advice. But in your case, like you said, the good thing was your GP was proactive, and she said, you know, let's get a second opinion. Now, if you have this kind of thing, or you think you've got it, and your GP saying, don't worry, go and chill, what would you suggest?
Well, I think then you've got to be fairly firm with your GP. You know, obviously you don't want to break down the relationship with your GP by being very difficult with them. But I think it's important for you to say, I'm not happy about that, I would like a second opinion. If you go and within those 3 weeks or after the 3 weeks and they say, well, let's see what develops, don't let it develop for very long. The chances of surviving bowel cancer, if you're proactive and it's in its early stages, as in my case, is roughly 93%. If it's left, it's roughly 50-50. So the odds are quite scary. There are statistically more problems with men getting treatment, because men are less inclined to bare their bottoms. That's not to say that ladies do it all of the time, but particularly with childbirth and other things, gynecological things, they're more inclined to feel less inhibited. Men are a problem. So I particularly bang the drum when I go out and do my talks around the country to the men. Often I hear tales that men have been pooing blood for a number of months, in one case years, and done nothing about it. And whether, that probably wasn't bowel cancer, because I think he would have had bigger problems. But nevertheless, pooing blood for a number of years it is not good. So statistically, men have more problems, or are more of a problem. But the real hitting home point is that bowel cancer is the second biggest cancer killer in the UK after lung cancer. There's a lot of PR about testicular, breast cancer and things like that, but we don't like talking about poo and bums. We're too reserved, and beating bowel cancer use the pitch of don't die of embarrassment, because that often is the difference between getting help and missing that important golden opportunity to do something.
Yeah. So I was actually saying, when you were saying there is the second biggest killer after lung cancer. Looking at the NHS and the signs and the symptoms that they put here, they actually says that the vast majority of people with bowel cancer are over the age of 60.
That's true statistically, and when Bruce Sizer was talking to me, he did say you should walk the treatment because you're young and you're fit. Well, I was 59 then, and I didn't feel young
and fit.
and I didn't feel fit. But he said, in comparison to the majority of people that get it, you are. And although I didn't know what people were having treatment for, when I was at the oncology department, I have to say that the vast majority of people there that were male had the hallmarks to my eye of being much older than me.
Okay.
But of course they could have been there for any form of cancer or whatever. There were some ladies that were appeared to be younger than me, and they might have had something other than bowel cancer or whatever. Of course, I'll never know, nor should I. But yes, the men particularly seemed older. That's not to say you can't get it younger. One of the people that does a lot of good work for the Beating Bowel Cancer charity, he got it in his 20s.
Whoa.
And that's uncommon, but not that uncommon. And so you need to be proactive whenever. If you're under 35, when you are diagnosed with it, there's a possibility that they might decide to look at as to whether or not there is something within the family.
Okay.
They'd look at that possibility, check other members of your family and whatever. But over 35, the vast majority just got bad luck. In my case, my surgeon suggested that mine was caused by stress.
Really?
As to how accurate that diagnosis was, I don't know.
No.
We will never know. But there are a number of things that you could put it down to, but that would probably have been reasonable in terms of my lifestyle at the time. He reckoned 18 months prior to me seeing him was probably when it developed, and that was a particularly stressful
Time
part.
for you.
Yeah. But whether there is just simply a bullet with your name on, and that just happens to be the case, or my mother's and father's side of the family are heart related. My mother's 92, she'd had a quad bypass and so on and so forth. My father died at 50, third coronary. So everything that I could have in terms of tests were to do with heart and cholesterol. Cancer just did not come up on the radar.
You lucky chap.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the likely symptoms. I mean, clearly from our discussion, you have mentioned that that doesn't necessarily mean you've got bowel cancer.
No, I mean, statistically, it probably means that you haven't got bowel cancer, you've got something else. But either way, it needs to be checked out because it's if it happened to be, in the unlikely event it happened to be bowel cancer, that's the best possible chance to be in the 93% and not in the 50-50.
In fact, I think that 93% is fantastic.
Well, and it's possible. It's possible that perhaps not in my lifetime, they'll improve upon that.
Yeah,
but they need to have all of the combinations. You need to have proactive people, particularly men that may have some symptoms. You need to have proactive GPs who don't say, well, let's just see what happens. We don't have a good record in the UK of diagnosis.
Okay.
And that's an area that the charity Beating Bowel Cancer are doing their utmost to improve.
Okay. You know, you were talking about men not obviously pulling down their trousers and having somebody check it and all that. And somebody's also going to listen to you and say, okay, you went, your GP, her fingers went long enough and, you know, all that kind of thing. As a man yourself, having been through it, what would be your strong advice to men? Because obviously it wasn't something that was in your family, so it was not something you could say, okay, let me just go and check because it's in my family.
Yeah.
So it's not hereditary. So
No.
unlike breast cancer, you tend to think my aunt had it or my mom had it,
Yes.
so I'm going to go and check. So what would you say to men?
Well, you've just got to be in tune with your body. You've just got to recognise changes. Simple things like when you've sat on the loo, maybe looking
that
back.
seems like the
Yeah.
strongest possible.
Yeah, look at the paper. It's not a very pleasant thing to necessarily do, but being in tune, being proactive. If you're diagnosed with perhaps anemia, that doesn't mean to say that you've got cancer or bowel cancer or whatever, but that's one of the little telltale signs that your GP should perhaps follow through, be a little bit more thinking outside the box, and so on and so forth. Beating bowel cancer do an awful lot of PR, particularly with people in the medical profession, trying to get them to be more aware, refer more frequently, earlier, and so on and so forth. I had a good run. I could not have had a better run, but I hear very often terrible tales that people have gone to their GP, but they haven't got to the right person soon enough, and the prognosis has not been quite so good
in their favour.
Yeah.
But talk about the charity,
Yeah.
and coming back to you personally about your family. Obviously, my perception of you as a person in the short time that I've known you is that...
Am I going to like this?
I don't know. We're going to find out. It's basically the fact that you've got this needs doing, get my head down and, get on with it.
Yep.
My philosophy or principle to that in life is the egg is broken. No point crying about it. Scoop it up, throw it away. If you're that desperate, fry it and eat it.
Yeah.
So you had this situation and that's exactly what you did. But your family, did you actually have family sitting down talking about it?
No, that was my biggest, with hindsight, that was my biggest regret. In fact, I mentioned it. I did a talk in London at the Guildhall for the Lord Mayor of the City of London, just before Christmas. And I did focus on that because it was the patient helpline that I was attempting to raise money for. There were 500 people, 500 guests there, and my intention was for them to leave the building, but only after they'd made a donation. Unfortunately, they did, and in greater value than we'd expected.
Good.
So that was very good. But I did say that the patient helpline is not just for patients themselves, but for their families. And I wish my family had known about that, because I'm almost embarrassed to say I didn't give their reaction enough thought. So it was only months after I'd had the operation when I was talking with my son, and he confessed that it was at Christmas, and he had grave concerns about me making that Christmas and so on and so forth. Now I never did. But it just...
Were you so assured that you're going to be around?
I don't know why I was that positive. In fact, my surgeon said to me, because he retired recently, he said to me, in all the years he'd been in practice, I was one of his most positive patients. But I didn't set out to be. That was just how I handled it. I just, from an accountancy background, I worked to a diary, I worked to a program. So if they said you've got 8 weeks radiotherapy and you've got so many weeks chemo tablets, I, in my mind, ticked off the time. When I was having an MRI scan and they said this next slice, this next picture is going to be 3 minutes, in my mind, I would count the 3 minutes.
Wow.
And with my eyes shut and in another world, and I
Get
just
on with it.
just get on with it. And that, unfortunately, wasn't how my
Son or
family. And
So did you feel guilty? Did you say
with
it in a
hindsight,
nice
with
way?
hindsight, but not at the time. I was totally oblivious to that at the time. But my daughter started working for the John Lewis Partnership at their head office, and it coincided, just absolute fluke, coincided with their head office charity for a whole year being Beating Bowel Cancer.
Wow.
And so she made sure that her department at head office raised the most money in the year for beating bowel cancer, and her colleagues got dressed up in some shorts, red and white shorts with plastic bum cheeks on the back and things like that. It was actually Bruce Sizer, the Australian, who recommended, because I said I wanted to put something back, and he recommended that I got involved with beating bowel cancer. My consultant now, that Professor Motson has retired, is a chap called Tan Aralampalan, who is from Sri Lanka, and he is very good. He tells me that he hasn't done much lately, but he used to be the general surgery consultant for things like Holby City. So you would see his name come up at the end as we have done, but he's now so busy doing all of the patients that he's inherited from Professor Motson, like myself and whatever, that he's finding it hard to do the TV and whatever. He tells me though he'd like to do a movie, like to be involved in a movie. So if there's no, I think he'd just like to be the general consultant, surgery consultant on a movie, and probably have his own caravan, and a makeup artist and things like that.
Man can dream.
Yeah. So I got in contact with Beating Bowel Cancer and offered my services, and I do talks for Rotaries and WIs and things like that, but my main thrust for beating bowel cancer is in the workplace.
Okay.
Again, particularly with men, but not exclusively men, because these days you have as many females on a building site.
Yes, true.
Some of the most of the questions that I had when I did a Crossrail site in Kent a few months back were from ladies. Some of the men can't cope with it and leave the meeting. I'm only talking about me, only talking about me, but some feel, I remember at Bradwell Power Station, I thought somebody was on call because they rushed out, but it wasn't, because any talk of hospitals or things like that, they feel faint. And I was no more explicit than I have been so far in this, but they just couldn't cope with it. So I've got one in Battersea coming up, another one in Woolwich, and they're mainly sort of big building sites often. Did one at Cannon Street for the new Blomberg European Centre. Did Battersea Power Station.
Wow. You do get around.
Yes, Norwich for an insurance firm.
Okay. So how do people get your details? How do they contact you?
Initially by contacting Beating Bowel Cancer. I think most of the staff there know of me because I'm the silly one who does my talks generally in those red and white striped bum shorts. I was challenged years ago to travel on the train. I was doing the Olympic Village when they were converting the Olympic Village back into accommodation from the athletes to a longer term, and I was challenged to travel on the train in my bum shorts and walk through Westfield shopping centre and give my talk in it. And I did. I got the money,
really?
and I've do my talks ever since. I've done my talks in the bum shorts.
Wow. So why are we missing out on this occasion?
Well, I can put them on if you like, but they're well documented, and so there's quite a few people that at Beating Bowel Cancer who are aware of how I approach these things. So hopefully there won't be any problems with coming or linking up with me. I've also, with the help of Beating Bowel Cancer, set up a Facebook site for it's the North Essex and Suffolk Beating Bowel Cancer site. So you
obviously they can
go
see
on
it
there.
on the screen.
Yeah, I have to say that it is not something that in itself has been popular, although I'm told that it is the second biggest site for that Beating Bowel Cancer have set up on Facebook. Where the work is done is on private messaging. Because people don't want to say, I've got this and I may have that and whatever. So if somebody comes into that site and it's a closed group, so I have to approve the person to join, and I've not turned anybody down yet, then if they want to private message me, I'm dealing with a lovely lady in Belfast at the moment, not in my area, but through Beating Bowel Cancer, we got talking to each other. She's been through a really tough time and hopefully coming out of the end of that now. And I'll probably never meet her. But it's nice to have been able to share and be an ear. Yeah, be an ear to somebody who's not been very well. And it's telling, though, unfortunately, that when you know that somebody unfortunately has passed away because you've seen, you've contributed, you may not have necessarily have met them, but you've been in conversation with them electronically, and we all feel it. And there's a lot of people on Facebook that are beating bowel cancer. It's a great charity, as I say.
Do they run like an annual event?
They do a patient day for people that are still perhaps in the early stages where they're having treatment and they want to talk to people. But you can get that over the phone or over the internet because the patient helpline is manned by medical people. So it's not just somebody who is an aspiring a helper. It's not like a call centre where you ring up.
Professional people.
They're professional people. It costs a lot of money to actually run that service, and it's all done on donations. And so your folk, if they're mindful of the need for them to be proactive themselves with their bodies, if they're mindful that they must make sure that their GP is proactive, and they want to help in any other way, well, it's a charity. So you can get people like me to give talks. You can raise money, as my daughter did for John Lewis. I can't remember the amount of money that they raised, but a phenomenal amount of money just at their head office. And they also rolled out a program for their staff, educational. So that was as important as anything else. And I think that it will probably be much longer than my lifetime, but eventually we'll have people that aren't embarrassed about their bums and poos. It's something that will become more relaxed about. They say that the British are the stiff upper lip and so on and so forth. I don't know which country is the relaxed upper lip. There must be some countries that are more inclined to be proactive, but we're certainly not in the UK. We lag behind everybody else.
Well, there's two things that's come up. Obviously, I was going to say, is there any particular ethnicity that this is more common within? Is just a general one? And then obviously, since from what you're saying, men are the one that are more reluctant to get their trousers down, don't want to talk about poos and bum. Well, have you done any presentation in a pub? Because I'm sure you get loads of men in there.
I haven't done them in pubs, I have to admit. I've done them in canteens where some people found the combination of my talking and food a little bit too much. And I did one for a Rotary recently, and I think it was a fluke. But the meal was bangers and mash in brown gravy, and I did make a passing reference to it.
You just wanted to ruin their meal.
So I joke about it as much as I can do, because I want to break down those barriers. I want people to not necessarily talk about poo and bums as the most important subject, but not feel inhibited about doing so, because as far as I know, everybody poos and everybody's got a bum.
That's right.
So, why should we be embarrassed about it? We're not so embarrassed now about breasts and breast cancer and things like that, which of course men can get, much to a lesser extent, but men can get as well. We're not so embarrassed about
Well,
about
that's
doing
because
that.
we're always constantly talking about it, isn't it?
Yep.
Tesco do their run,
Yep.
the cancer people do their run, so there's the foundation. So I think because that is always like constantly in your face,
Yes.
and there's always like keyring stickers, bumpers, stickers, and all those kind of things. So I think obviously, which is the main reason why you and I obviously are sitting down, to help people, to bring enlightenment, to bring awareness, and to just say, whatever it is, do not take it for granted. Go out there, get help, and obviously do not leave your family behind. Because obviously, like I said, if your decisions had gone wrong, your loved ones would have had to pick up the pieces.
Yes.
And I don't know whether they'll be sending you curses in your grave and say, he didn't ask us, he just made all the decisions, and all that kind of thing. So obviously, there is support out there.
Yes.
What did you call the charity again?
Beating Bowel Cancer. Patient line,
Okay.
patient helpline. It is readily available on the web. All of the necessary contact details, the services that they provide, how you can raise money. There's lots of people doing cycle rides. In December, there's a beardathon, as it were. People growing beards for it. My daughter, in actual fact, the ice bucket challenge, which we did.
Yeah.
Well, my daughter did hers for beating bowel cancer.
Ooh.
So it's there's lots of ways that you can be involved, and obviously I've got a vested interest in bowel cancer because I'm surviving.
Yes, you are.
But it's a charity that even if I hadn't got it, deserves support, because it's this silent killer almost, because people aren't talking about it. So it's the important thing. Talk about it, be proactive.
During the period where obviously you've had your operation, you've come out 3 months, the bag is got rid of the bag. Between the end of the operation, so to say, and you started to recover, and your final 5 years in getting the all clear, what were those period like? Were they period of, is it coming back, or oh hallelujah, it's all gone, I can get on with my life? What were this period like?
I never thought it's coming back. I always thought it could come back, because it can appear in different areas of your body. Sometimes the primary cancer is not the one that kills you, it's the secondary, and so on and so forth. So I was always very streetwise, still am, of the possibility that just by bad luck it could come back, or it could find its way somewhere else. But it never made me stop doing anything. The 6 weeks after my operation, I wasn't well. I wasn't well because I was recovering. I'm somebody who suffers from back problems, and so with sitting around, laying around, I have a lady who comes in and manipulates my back once a month.
Aren't you a lucky guy?
Well, she actually did it with me sitting around the wrong way in a dining room chair because I couldn't lay down. I was certainly not on my stomach. So she was innovative on that, and we were only reminiscing about that last week when she paid a visit. When I had the colostomy bag, my wife very kindly helped me with it. It was much better as a two-man job, because you need to get that bag positioned exactly because it's not completely cylindrical. It's was a bit tricky to get it in the right place, and that was very useful. As I say, we're fortunate. I'm fortunate that we didn't have to continue doing that indefinitely, but some people see that as a major improvement in their life. But it's been a long haul over the 5 years. It's not that suddenly, after I had the colostomy bag removed, that you are back totally to how you were, because your body has to get used to its new arrangement. And so I used to carry around, and probably still have in glove compartments of my car, shows you how often I go in there and clean it out, things like spare pants, baby wipes, and just in case you get taken short. And for the first year or two or longer, I always used to have some Imodium in my pocket, just in case. But those people that are perhaps at the early part of their recovery from an operation such as mine might think that it's never going to get better. It does, but it's a very slow process. I once asked somebody how long was it going to be before I was back to normal. The dedicated nurse that I had, Dawn Stiff, and she didn't answer the question.
Really?
Maybe because the answer was not what I might have wanted to hear. But there are reassurances that I can give people that have been through the mill. When I speak for groups, usually somebody comes up to me afterwards and says, "Oh, well, I had that more years ago than you have, or less years, or my wife, or my son, or whatever." There's usually something like that comes up at the end of the talk. The talks are free, so if any of the groups out there want guest speakers,
and they're lucky people.
Well, whether it's me, or somebody else, because we're all around the country, then we're more than willing to come along and talk. Just try and shut us up.
Oh, no, I do try. Well, thank you very much for sitting with me. Obviously, it's not for my immediate benefit, it's for the benefit as
well. It is because you know me, and you know more now than you did before.
Definitely.
So if I've achieved only that, that's a step in the right direction.
You're right, because if I never met you, I probably wouldn't know anything about it. You know, funny you should say that, because there was a brother not long ago, the wife was saying that he was going to the toilet constantly. I think I spoke to you about it. He did go to have a check and it was nothing. But if I had never spoken to you, I've never met you, and you never said anything. In fact, because I actually stood on his neck, because the wife was saying go, and he wasn't going. And I was constantly phoning him until I said, just go. And then he did it, like me, didn't go back for the result. And I kept saying, you have to. And finally he got it, and he got back to me and said, you know, it's not something that he needs to.
It's nearly always good news, but if it's left, you've missed that golden opportunity.
So like you said, the key word here is early. And if you do find yourself in this situation, take your family along, because they are part of your family and they need to know what is happening. And obviously the charity that you support, the details are there. You do say it's free. Anybody can call you, and it doesn't. And if you don't like his face, he doesn't have to be the one that will turn up. They will send somebody equally as handsome or not as handsome, and they will deliver the job. But like you said, even if it's one life that it changes, we've done something positive. So your name is Robert Clubb, and you are a fantastic. I'll reserve the rest for some time else.
And thank you for helping to spread the word.
You're welcome.